Hey guys, we're live, and hi, I'm Mitch Brisker, and welcome back to Scientology: The Big Lie. Or if you're new here, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. So today I got a great show for you. This is the biggest chapter of Scientology: The Big Lie: How I Made an Evil Cult Look Good. My personal accounting and holding myself accountable for my having enabled Scientology for so many years. So this, I think, it starts in about 2015 and covers the development and ultimate launch of Scientology Media Productions. And I think you're really going to dig this, so just stick around.
If you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
Hey, how are you all? Hope you're doing okay. Just needed to get my ears on there. So let me see who's here. Okay, Love Food Kitchen says, looking forward to this chapter a lot. The whole S&P Scientology network thing absolutely fascinates me. So much money, time, and effort for no result outside of showing whales their money was needed and encouraging them to continue to donate. So yeah, it is completely an internal marketing thing. It wasn't what was originally promised. uh, but anyway, that's all beside the point. But I tell you, before we, hey, Paralyzed to Paralyze, are you here? Because I'm gonna actually uh, give you a shout for an email you sent me. I'm just gonna bring it up. I was talking about in a previous chapter talking about superpower, and I mentioned this idea of color deprivation, which at the time I didn't even know was a thing. I said on the segment, I didn't even know if this was a thing. And, uh, and it's kind of like, here's an example of Scientology mindset, and I still struggle with this, that you are so thoroughly indoctrinated that you are the cause of all of your problems, and there's nobody else trying to influence you or you know, dilute your agency or take it away or anything like that, which is completely not true, because you are responsible for what happens to you. But there are other individuals that can have could greatly affect your outcome. So there I was sitting there thinking, oh, what's wrong? I've been in this monotone, low key. Well, it's actually not low key, but this monotone space. Uh, for 12 hours a day for 4 days, and I'm mentally losing my mind. And I couldn't even get on an airplane. I had to be driven back to LA from Clearwater. I mentioned this to you guys, and then this very interesting conversation started about color deprivation. Let me just, and hey, if you wouldn't mind announcing who you are, if you're here. I got a few people here, which is great. Appreciate it. Here it is again. This is the main hallway walking into Superpower. You're not quite, I couldn't really find any, I found some postage stamp size photos, but this is actually looking back towards the entrance. The sort of brown monotone background is the color scheme of the interior of the flag building itself. But now you get into this very monotone blue environment. I just wanted to put that up. And I want to read you part of the information that Paralyzed to Paralyze was very, I really appreciate it, is what I'm trying to say. I appreciate what you did to send this to me. Let me bring this up here. So this is what it says right here. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay, guys. Okay, good. Hold on. This is a little complicated because I've got it on a whole nother place. Here it is. Effects of prolonged exposure to bluish silver, dimly lit environment with color deprivation. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes so you can read this. Psychological effects, emotional flattening and isolation. I'm just going to abbreviate them. Number 2, neurological and sensory effects, reduced neural stimulation. Number 3, psychological effects, circadian rhythm disruption. And then behavioral and long-term effects, hallucinations or color cravings, and extreme cases the brain may fill gaps. So, whoa, I was like, wait a minute. Did we just uncover the fact that the interior color scheme and the design of the superpower the fourth floor at Flag, where they, deliver these the perception drills. Is this designed to kind of blunt a person's emotion, to kind of reduce their cognitive abilities, to make them more receptive to the kind of indoctrination that's incoming? I think we have. I think we may have discovered that. And I got to tell you, I did a lot of research when I was writing the book. I never even thought to Google color deprivation because I thought, nah, you made that up. Nah, it's your fault. You were just having a bad day. You hadn't slept. You were overworked, blah, blah, blah. So I called it color deprivation. But turns out this is like a real thing. So Adam Carmona says, uh, he asked, "Did Gensler design superpower?" Yeah, I'm assuming you mean the floor. They didn't have anything to do with the design of any of the perceptic drill stations, but they wouldn't have set the color scheme. All of that would have been done in the architect's office, or sort of, it's actually the landlord's office. It used to be called the architect's office. The sort of color schemes and the whole motif would have been. Pretty much presented to them, and because they, I don't think they were ever sort of in cahoots, like, hey, we got a way to design this thing that'll really mess with people. So uh, Matthias, how do you pronounce that? Matthias Bartle said, "This is like the planet Camino from Star Wars, where they breed the clone army." Yeah, something like that. This actually might be it. And I wondered if this was their idea of the implant station. Supposedly there's an implant station on Venus, excuse me, where you go between lives. Uh, oh, where's my drink? Oh, well, I might have to jump off and grab it. So anyway, that's where that's what that's all about. So let me now pull up. Let me just get rid of this. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I have to, 1 second. Okay, man, sometimes I suck at this. I just need to bring the book up. Just be a second. Yeah, somehow it got closed when I showed you those other things. So here we go, and and open. My internet's slow. Okay, here we go. So let me share. I'm really not just treading water, waiting for more people, but this would be a good way to do it. Present screen window. Here we go. Okay. Okay, good. I'm assuming you can all see that okay? Yeah, I have a frog body thing, yeah, in my throat. Yeah, I'll just that's gone. We're good. I phlegmed it the hell out of them. They're a little like having a fur ball, when you're a cat. I think that's what the throat BTs are all about. Okay, let me go back to my book and then we will start reading. Here we go. Chapter 24 is Scientology Media Productions. In a Scientology organization, whether it's a church that services the public or a Sea Org production facility such as Gold or SMP, Division 1 holds the responsibility of establishing the organization. The term establishment in this context includes the hiring of new staff and ensures that they know how to do their jobs, which means, they're 100% compliant, setting up the lines of internal and external communication, collecting and reporting the organization's statistics, making sure executives are informed of anything stopping the organization, and most importantly, ensuring that the staff maintains the highest level of ethical behavior. Now, we know what that means. Yeah, that's you have to conform to an incredibly strict puritanical Victorian sort of kind of like very North Korean feeling ethics level, where you worship a leader and you follow all these policies and you turn in your stats or whatever. Let me read this. You get more of an idea. Uh, of Ethical behavior. Okay, Division One, also known as the Hubbard Communications Office, or HCO, or the Scientology organization's thought police. It's Gestapo and it's Big Brother with some telecommunication and IT skills thrown in for good measure. If you get hauled in and subjected to a committee of evidence, Scientology's kangaroo court version of a military court martial, it's HCO that does the hauling in and runs the show. Certainly before the opening day of the Scientology Media Productions, Miscavige's hand-picked HCO establishment team showed up from Flag. Some of them were repurposed from HCO Flag, and some new trainees were specially handpicked for SMP. Their favorite pastime seemed to be interrogating staff in one of the tiny interview rooms located in the basement of the main administration building. It's in the basement because it's just made a whole lot harder to get out of there. Generally speaking, problems in an organization trace back to leadership style. When considering Miscavige's leadership, I am reminded of a quote from author Tom Robbins. Since when has leadership been a criterion for sanity, or vice versa? Hitler was a gifted leader. Even Nixon exhibited leadership qualities even Nixon exhibit leadership qualities as an adolescent. They pack you up to law school for an anus transplant. If it takes, you go into government. Tim Robbins' Still Life with Woodpecker. I highly recommend that book. I'll put it in the show notes. Uh, the same could be said for joining the Sea Org. If the anus transplant takes, you go into HCO. An organization can suffer from too little establishment, resulting in no or faulty communication lines, untrained staff, computers that don't work, etc. But S&P had the opposite problem, too much establishment, where you found yourself struggling to balance your time between spending it conforming to the rigors of compliance and reporting as mandated by HCO, and the work you need to get done that you actually need to get paid for. That is too much establishment. I mean, imagine working for an organization where every week you had to write a lengthy request saying why you should be paid what your invoice says, and having that be subject to rejection by a number of people up a kind of a gauntlet on its way to whoever is going to write the check. It's absolutely amazing. Okay. That is too much establishment. When you are constantly scrutinized, and when you, just like I'd witnessed at Gold, the cost of failure, and when, just like I'd witnessed at Gold, the cost of failure is so high, it sucks all the oxygen out of the room, that is too much establishment. I mean, if you look at a really abnormal country like, North Korea, or any very autocratic, fascistic country, you'll see that the country is established. It has the more you want to lessen a person's freedom, the more you want to establish your organization so that it has, rules and regulations and lieutenants and cops, people on the street beat and spies and all that other stuff. It's just too much establishment. In addition to the ex-coke snorting ex-Hollywood reporter writer and the highly talented singer mom writer who ratted him out for snorting coke in the men's room at Scientology's clown car, known as the Office of Special Affairs, a slew of other non-Scientologist staff were hired to fill positions as marketing and magazine copywriters, graphic designers, a couple of broadcast professionals, a documentary director or two, and a couple of video editors. Generally, Miscavige doesn't like dealing with people he doesn't know personally, especially people who'll be working around him on projects he will need to approve or reject, and who he may run into on a daily basis. What do these people know about him? What have they heard? What have they read? Because remember, these are all not even Scientologists, so they have access to the entire world of information. So there was a suspicion about, these people are coming in here to work, but what do they really know about me? Because as I'm sure you've heard, just like L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige is super paranoid and thinks that the environment around him, including his own people, is inhabited by suppressive people, meaning people who have his best interests not in heart. What have they read? For that matter, what did SMP staff know about the accusations and rumors that have been leveled at Miscavige for decades? So yeah, imagine, because you got a lot of Sea Org members that are now coming to SMP. They've been in this extreme information blackout, and now they're coming to work at a media studio where they are inevitably going to be exposed to some of that stuff. So now Miscavige wants to proof them all up. He wants to get everybody like indoctrinated into the fact that the only reason he's been attacked so much is because he's a victim, which is a thing that narcissists and psychopaths do. Uh, yeah, by the way, you won't hear me use the word narcissist very much, only because it's replaced the word asshole. Like, why did we need a new word for asshole? Yeah, most of the people that, your girlfriend breaks up with you, she's a narcissist. Your boyfriend breaks up with you, she's a narcissist. So I'm just saying, like, use that word thoughtfully. The scavenge is a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist. He's all those things. But a lot of the people who that name is leveled at, they're assholes. I think they should just change it in the DSM to asshole syndrome. Generally, Miscavige was, blah, blah, blah. I read that. Okay, so what have they heard? What have they read? For that matter, what did SMP staff know about the accusations and rumors that had been leveled at Miscavige for decades? Scientology was gearing up to embark on its greatest public relations and information venture ever, a venture intended to fill, that's in quotes, fill the vacuum, displacing the torrent of negative information that had been swirling around Scientology for decades. Miscavige, okay, I'm going to just stop right here and explain something. I've talked about this before, but this term, fill the vacuum, Scientologists believe, and this is pushed by all the upper management people and mostly David Miscavige, because this is what L. Ron Hubbard said. If all that bad press that's going on and all those people outside your org protesting and all the lawsuits and all that stuff, they all stem from a lack of the correct information about Scientology. Hubbard claimed, and Miscavige pushes, there is a vacuum of good information out there. So that's why you're seeing this ad campaign right now. Like, their response to all the recent activities against them is to an ad campaign, because they believe all they need to do is just fill the vacuum. It's this kind of magical thinking. It's like, oh, if I just fill the vacuum, it'll all go away. If I just put out good news, it'll all go away. Utterly not true. But this term, I didn't play it up that much in the book, but this term, fill the vacuum, is a driving influence in terms of an ideological thought of that really controls a lot of their activities. They see people protesting outside of church and they're like, wow, we got a vacuum problem. We need to fill the vacuum, because if these people knew how cool we are, how good we are, they wouldn't be doing this. Okay, let's move on. So yes, we're now going to, okay, so here, this is Miscavige understood that the staff at S&P and the professionals he'd hired would be tasked with piloting that new venture straight into the headwinds of an aggressively negative press. In his speech at S&P's grand opening, Miscavige paraphrased author Frank X. Walker's often repeated quote, "If you don't write your story, somebody else will." Adding his own personal touch, he said, and I quote, "So yes, we're now going to be writing our history like in no other religion in history." Miscavige, like Hubbard before him, is obsessed with information control. That story, the one he alluded to, would need to be based on facts, and he knew well that whoever controls the facts controls the story. Not long after I should have put facts in quotes there. Not long after the grand opening, I was invited to attend a mandatory briefing along with 50 or so pros and staff that was intended to ensure we all had our facts straight. This was 100% a mass gaslighting indoctrination. Yesterday I showed a picture of the auditorium, and it's pretty hypnotic. I mean, again, it was designed by Gensler, but it's, I'll pull the picture up later. It's just like, okay, so we filed into the softly lit auditorium. The first thing I noticed was the 8-foot folding table on which sat a half dozen or so thick 3-ring binders. At the table arranging the binders was Len Farney, OSA legal liaison. Len is not a lawyer, but he has been involved in every major Scientology legal action for decades and has a working knowledge of Scientology and Hubbard's legal history going back as far as pre-Dianetics days. You may have heard about Len Farney. I mean, I can remember, when when Marty Rathman was pretending to be an ex-Scientologist, a former Scientologist, before he was, sidebar, Marty Rathman never went back to Scientology. They would never let him back. He just took a bunch of money and did his thing. Uh, but anyway, I heard Marty talk about him a lot, and various different people during the various different legal cases. You would people report on them, you'd hear his name come up. So Lynn is not a lawyer, but he has been involved in every major. Yeah, I said that. Scientology and Hubbard. Okay, I said that. Okay. I thought it was bizarre when it was happening. Looking back from my current position, it is even more so. Farney covered everything from accusations that Miscavige murdered Hubbard to his having been responsible for the death of his mother-in-law. That would be Shelley's mom, who died of very suspicious circumstances. 2 gunshot wounds with a rifle. So it was a supposed unaliving. I don't know about that. Some of it was based on persistent rumors, and some of it, like the Lisa McPherson wrongful death suit, were based on legal action brought against him personally. I can only attribute the briefing of Miscavige to Miscavige's narcissistic need to play the persecuted victim. One thing that wasn't mentioned, despite its being a lightning rod for bad press, was the mystery surrounding his wife Shelley's disappearance from public view. I first met Shelley Miscavige shortly after arriving at Gold. I thought she was even-tempered and friendly. My interactions with her were mostly confined to social things, arranging for birthday and Christmas gifts for Miscavige and such, or at post-event formal dinners. For the years running up to her disappearance, she had been a constant fixture in Miscavige's entourage. A few years after she was relocated to an undisclosed location in 2007, I ran into her while stopping for lunch in Redlands, California, on my way to the international base. Redlands is a sleepy little town just off the Oh, excuse me 1 second. Redlands is a sleepy little town just off the, hold on. Just off the San Bernardino Freeway, about 2/3 of the way from LA to Gold. If you're into Victorian Carpenter Gothic or Mission Revival architecture, Redlands is worth a tour. Yeah, there's a bunch of famous architecture there, Victorian, turn of the century, last century, but also the Kimberly, the heiress to the Kimberly Clark, the toilet paper fortune, tissue paper. Uh, they have a old Victorian mansion out there, which is a popular location for weddings and film shoots. So yeah, this Redlands is an interesting place. So continuing east past Redlands, you'll discover it's the last outpost of civilization until you hit the golf course riddled star-studded playground of Palm Springs. Nevertheless, Redlands is a great place to stop for lunch before driving off into the wasteland of Moreno Valley and then on to the international base. If Gold were Dante's Inferno, then leaving Redlands, traveling eastward toward Gold, you'd find the inscription, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." Redlands was my usual lunch stop on my Monday drive to the base, and it was a straight shot down a winding mountain road from Big Bear and the CST, Church of Spiritual Technology, compound where Shelley was rumored to be living. Leaving Starbucks on the way back to my car, I spotted Shelley in the company of 2 other RTC staff members and an executive from CST. I knew all 4 of them. One of them had been my auditor, and the first one had told me about Jason Begay's car accident. Sitting there chatting under a cafe umbrella on a warm late spring day, they appeared no different than any 4 girlfriends out for a friendly lunch. Until that moment, I hadn't thought about the fact that I had not seen Shelley for some years. After all, people disappeared from the international base all the time, often for no other reason than having been sent on an extended mission to some other part of the world, or thrown in the hole, or they died, or they escaped, or they got, commubbed and kicked out. So you're used to seeing people disappear. You just didn't ask, you don't ask questions in that kind of high control group. Okay. Not to mention, I'd been indoctrinated into the mindset that I was a goal to make films and not poke around in Sea Org business or ask too many questions. That she'd been moved to a secretive location during a time when I wouldn't have noticed her absence, and that running into her was inconsequential. Somehow I'd caught their attention and they all looked over at me. What followed was a brief, awkwardly polite conversation. Thinking back on this, all evidence pointed to Shelley having been relocated to the CST facility near Big Bear, and she was having lunch at Redlands in the company of her handlers. As one of the women in her group was wearing a CST uniform, I assumed she was on a special project for CST. One thing was for certain. No sooner did Shelley disappear from public than Miscavige's personal assistant became a ubiquitous presence at his side. Unlike Shelley, who was not always with Miscavige and sometimes not even on the same schedule, Lou was never absent from his side and always seemed to be on the same schedule. That time I flew with them to UK on Tom Cruise's jet. Lou and Dave spent the night together in the master bedroom, although there was plenty of room for her to sleep in the very comfortable forward passenger cabin. Yeah, I think that cabin is sleeps like 8 people, and the beds are really comfortable. Uh, and it was just like me and Diana Hubbard and what's her name, Karen Alpers, the head of the IAS, and one other, just four, and me. There's four of us, so plenty of room for her to sleep. And you think like any, you know, CEO would know that it's a bad look to spend the night in an airplane, private jet bedroom with your assistant. So at least he would have been bright enough to send her, you know, into sleep in the forward cabin. But anyway, uh, okay, so spent the night together in the mess. Oh no, there was plenty of room to sleep in the. Okay, I never thought they were anything but a secret couple. In my opinion, Laurie Stickenbrock is the mystery woman behind Shelley's disappearance. Insiders have speculated that the flashpoint for Shelley's disappearance was her suspicion that her husband was in a relationship with his assistant. So you know, I started reporting this when I first appeared on YouTube, and he didn't comport with some speculation from some quite big content creators, and I got attacked for even saying this. Like, you know, people who were like making the truth out of rumors, and I wasn't even trying to correct them. I was just telling my story. It's one of the reasons I think my channel stayed so small is because people had really profited off a narrative, which was not a bad narrative and was partially right, but it was missing a lot of facts. I started filling those facts in, and then one certain individual particular started saying, well, you know what? This guy was just there for the money and he was never in the Sea Org. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Because it was just, you know, and that's when I learned that this is a broken community and it's not cohesive enough to form a really effective movement. But I'm not calling anybody out for that because they know who they are. Okay, so here we go. So when I was living in one of the G units at Gold, Miscavige and Lou lived in an adjacent unit. On Friday mornings, I'd often see them returning to their cottage after pulling an all-nighter, spent analyzing the statistics that poured in from Scientology organizations around the world following the 2 p.m. Thursday deadline. Lou wasn't even tempered and friendly like Shelley. She could mimic Miscavige's angry outbursts and is the only Scientology senior executive who ever screamed at me in all those years. Fortunately, it was on the phone, and so it was like she started screaming, and I was like, just holding it away. You know, anyway, it's horrible. That was when they were struggling to open up SMP, and they had taken a shitload of money from donors, and the place was like a year and a half late, and they were freaking out because donors, these big whales, were starting to ask them. You know, they were selling special Scientology Media Productions meters. They were calling them, I don't know, some master communicator or something. I don't know. They gave them some designation. They were selling them for $15,000 a piece. Like they were just running. And so they, because I remember I was in a meeting, Miscavige flipped out and he was like, what am I going to tell the donors? Which is really what this is all about. Okay, so okay, so yeah, Lou screamed at me. Yeah. They would pendulum swing. They would scream at you and then be really nice. And they'd be pissed at you and then they'd be really nice. And then they'd be pissed at you and they'd be really nice. It's just crazy. I mean, mostly I saw that happen to other people, but then towards the end, it started to happen to me in an ever increasing circular fashion, which was just intolerable. With the renovations complete and the establishment team having put everything in place, on May 29th, 2016, Scientology Media Productions held its grand opening in the main courtyard just off its Sunset Boulevard entrance. The entire staff, the pros and business attire, and the Sea Org crew in their newly issued SMP uniforms, sat in the bleachers, and Miscavige introduced us all to a densely packed crowd of Scientologists beaming with pride at what their church had accomplished, many of whom had donated to the project. Yeah, and all the big donors were there. Bob Duggan, everybody was there. Uh, if I were keeping a ledger of the things that, over the years, pried me away from Scientology and inspired a return to rational thinking, high on the list would be that day at Gold when I witnessed Miscavige traumatizing those three executives. He'd made to sit on the blistering hot concrete while he verbally assaulted them, humiliating them in front of their fellow Sea Org members. Also high on that list was a particular phrase Miscavige uttered during his grand opening speech when he referred to Scientology as the coolest religion on earth. That's a very direct quote. I played those words back in my head a few times. I was at once embarrassed and disgusted. Even back when I was a true believer, I never thought of Scientology or any other religion as cool. The words cool and religion didn't belong in the same sentence, let alone next to one another. It's not that religion is uncool, though it certainly can be. It's that pop culture adjectives are not capable of capturing the essence of religion. Miles Davis was cool. It's James Dean was cool. Uh, the phrase, "Hey, dude, check out my cool religion," doesn't really work, does it? Miscavige often invited local religious leaders to attend the grand opening ceremonies of the ideal orgs. I imagine one of them, say a rabbi, hearing Miscavige's description of Scientology being the coolest religion, implying that the rabbi's religion was less cool. So, I mean, he could have just said, "We're cooler than the Jews, we're cooler than the Muslims, we're cooler than the Catholics." What the what? Like all Scientology facilities, SMP has an office for Hubbard. The LRH office at SMP is located in one of the brick buildings that once housed the original Monogram Studios. Not long before the grand opening, a letter from a producer at Monogram Studios addressed to L. Ron Hubbard and inviting him to come write for the studio was miraculously discovered among Hubbard's papers. The framed letter was included as part of the display in the small conference room located in the LRH office. Conveniently, the office had an exterior door that opened onto Sunset Drive. That's opposite Sunset Boulevard. On one side, on the south, it's Sunset Boulevard. On the north, it's Sunset Drive. A side street located at the back of the studio, and the street to which the letter to Hubbard was addressed, just for show, metal address numbers were added to the interior entrance of the building. I'm not claiming the letter was a forgery. Oh, yes, I am. I'm not claiming that the letter was a forgery, but its provenance is highly suspect. Despite an exhaustive search, I was unable to locate any historical connection between Hubbard and Monogram Studios. No credits in film archives, no posters, no advertisements of any kind, such as the ones advertising the Columbia Picture serials that featured a Hubbard writing credit. And I've covered this before, but Hubbard never wrote a screenplay ever. He was invited to Hollywood because his dime novels were being used as source material for serials, right? And on one of the serials, he was given a story by credit along with four screenwriters, but he never actually authored a screenplay. But they lie about that, and they say that he was a screenwriter. Uh, Okay, good. The letter is the only thing connecting Hubbard and Monogram. A letter to Hubbard inviting him to work at the studio, which Scientology now owns. A letter from the 30s, no less, suddenly surfaces just in time to be included as an anecdote in Miscavige's grand opening speech, and then be permanently memorialized in an office dedicated to Hubbard's screenwriting career. It takes an enormous stretch of imagination to accept such a coincidence with nothing to back it up. Miscavige likes to paint a picture in which L. Ron Hubbard, living or dead, is somehow involved in every aspect of Scientology history. The church purchases a broadcast facility, and lo and behold, a letter from the 30s suddenly it surfaces addressed to Hubbard from that very same address, offering him work as a screenwriter. How do you spell bullshit? That's B-U-L. Okay. With the new broadcast facility now open, the first order. Okay, so that is that story. Um, Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just like it's amazing. It's people would buy this. They think, oh my god, it would sort of permeate their magical thinking. Like, oh my god, somehow the unseen hand of Hubbard on Target 2 guided the leaders of Scientology to purchase this. This that's why Miscavige couldn't find another studio, because it was fate and destiny and L. Ron Hubbard controlling the scene, as a disembodied being or some BS like that. But people really, man, they ate this stuff up. It was amazing. Okay, so with the new broadcast facility now open, the first order of business was to complete the programming. Oh, I'm for Scientology Network. Yeah, I should mention the reason you hear so little about this is no one's left. There's only two people that left that were involved in any of this stuff, and that's myself and Rachel Hastings. Rachel is an old dear friend of mine still to this day, and we actually left within days of one another and didn't know it. She left S&P, I left Gold. It was Mike Rinder who got us in touch with each other, which I'm really grateful to Mike for doing that. Uh, but it's the reason why you don't hear any inside stuff. A lot of stuff you hear, and there's nothing wrong with it, because Scientology today is the same as it was, 15 years ago. But there's a lot of, in terms of the insider information, a lot of it's 10, 15, 20 years old. Okay, so with the new broadcast facility now open. Okay, I wrote that. Miscavige wanted to announce to the world that Scientology had its own television station, and that meant leasing a channel from a service provider. In today's world, television comes in two flavors. Over the air, known as OTA, the signals beamed across the airways and picked up at home via an antenna, just like the early days, but digital rather than analog. And over the top, or OTT, which is broadband internet delivery by cable, satellite, or IPTV, which is internet protocol television. Any TV you would see over your internet on a web page. Streaming is IPTV. Uh, internet okay, yeah, actually, IPTV is internet protocol TV. Okay, good. Enabling subscribers like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, etc. While you wouldn't think of subscribers to a service provider, while you wouldn't think of subscribing to a service provider that didn't carry your favorite streaming services, the Scientology network could only afford to be on one service. The service they chose was DirecTV, who, for a multi-year contract with $10 million, provided Scientology with a channel in a mostly unoccupied section designated for religious programming. You can find Scientology TV on DirecTV's channel 320, alongside Christian stations, televangelists, and the 700 Club for a mere $10 million in taxpayer underwritten dollars. Miscavige could boast to parishioners that Scientology had its own television station. And I remember the conversation when, I don't know if I mentioned this. There was a guy, they hired a guy, not a Scientologist, who had worked for DirecTV launching their digital platform. And so this guy had an in at DirecTV, and because he was their broadcast consultant, when it came time to buy a station, he went to his old bosses. I'm sure he got a massive kickback from that $10 million. And, anyway. And Seth, his name is Seth. If you object to what I'm saying and you're still working for that evil cult, you know me well. I think you still have my phone number. Give me a call. Let's talk about it. Okay, so let's move on. I bumped into Miscavige one day in the hallway of the administration building, the building that housed, among other things, his plush top floor executive suite, internet and social media operations, marketing, which mostly consisted of designing and writing magazines and brochures, international event planning, and HCO. Every Thursday, just after 2, Scientology's end of the week immutable deadline for turning in your weekly statistics, the entire senior staff at S&P would head to the basement of the admin building for their weekly meter checks, consisting of a moment spent in silence, holding the e-meter cans while an HCO staff member stared at the meter's needle to make sure your needle was clean. They were looking for erratic needle movement, a dirty needle, which supposedly meant the person was up to no good or had unclean thoughts about the organization or its managers. Anyone found with a dirty needle was held for further interrogation. It's the strangest thing watching a bunch of Sea Org members waiting in line for a meter check. On the surface, they seem cheerful, full of team spirit and camaraderie, but beneath the surface, they are straining to keep their spirits high as not to accidentally trigger a movement of the e-meter needle that might cause undue scrutiny. Miscavige pulled me aside and informed me he bumped into Kirstie Alley at Flag and that she wanted to meet about her ideas for a Scientology television show. He said I should give her a call. I said, okay, great. And that was the chat. And that was that. I first met Kirstie Alley at AOLA back around 1986 at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles. We'd both enrolled on the confidential course operating Thetan 1 or OT1. And like much of the study in Scientology, where you were required to team up with a study partner or twin, and Kirstie and I were twinned up. We weren't hang out together friends, but we were definitely friendly. We bonded over the similar paths that had led us into Scientology. With our history with drugs over the years, I interviewed her in her capacity as the spokesperson for Narconon. I think a lot of people forget that Kirstie Alley was Narconon's main spokesperson. We'd seen one another at Scientology functions or at a party she was throwing or a launch of an event for one of her products she endorsed. My point in mentioning all this is simply to say that when Miscavige suggested I give her a call, I didn't. I don't think he was actually aware of how well I knew her, that her cell number was in my contacts, and that shooting her a text and then calling her was not a problem. What happened next is a perfect example of how Miscavige has to control everything and has to be the one pulling the strings. Since the request to call Kirstie was SMP business, and it came from Miscavige rather than contacting her directly, I thought it appropriate to reach out to her via the president's office at Flag, the office responsible for looking after VIPs. The following day, Kirstie called and we arranged to meet at SMP. The next week, when she returned from Florida. Later that day, I read into Miscavige again. I mentioned I'd spoken with Kirstie. I thought he'd be pleased that I complied with his request so quickly, but instead, he flipped out. You what? Oh, sorry, I hope I didn't do that too loud. Apparently, when he asked me to contact her, he did not mean literally go out and contact her. He meant send him a proposal in the form of a CSW, completed staff work, a cumbersome request for approval, the form of which Hubbard lifted verbatim from an Air Force manual. The CSW would lay out the nature of the call and the reason why it should be approved. Submitting a CSW would allow Miscavige to micromanage the phone call, and apparently I had denied him that. He didn't specifically tell me I should have submitted a CSW, but I can tell from the veins bulging out of his neck that that's what he wanted, or at the very least, a dispatch stating, "Dear sir, thank you for asking me to contact Kirstie to discuss her ideas about a TV show. But before I contacted her, I wanted to let you know exactly what I intend to discuss with her, and to assure you that I won't make any kind of a commitment to her. I'll listen to her ideas, and then we'll consider what she had to say." I could tell he was about to rip me apart. Then, realizing we were in a busy hallway, he backed off. I continued saying, "She'll be back in town next week, and we'll call to set up a meeting." Realizing I hadn't caused any actual damage, he responded, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." Yeah, sometimes he would really get ahead of himself and then realize that he was really being too much of a dick at that moment. He'd kind of back away and go, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." But I think what really defines a person is not their reflection after the fact, but how they react to situations. If you're going to announce the launch of a new television network and you want to get noticed by the broadcast industry, um, you're going to need some kind of presence at the National Association of Broadcasters, the NAB convention, the world's largest event covering filmed entertainment, along with the development. This is a little nuance. I mean, in here is this is the story of my complete fall from grace with those people. The development, management, delivery of content across all mediums, okay? With the planned launch of the studio barely 2 months away, Scientology Media Productions broadcast consultant, the same guy that got them, that actually, I think it was like, $2 million a year or something for the station. But then Miscavige was like, "I want a multi-year deal. I don't want to be kicked off after a year." So I wonder why he was thinking that. So anyway, with the opening barely 2 months away, Scientology Media Productions broadcast consultant insisted they needed to announce the upcoming launch of Scientology TV at the NAB convention. The plan was to create a 2-minute video, a sizzle reel that established the network's mission statement and teased the yet to be produced programming. The plan called for the broadcast consultant and the COO Project Ops, who was over SMP, to load the sizzle reel onto an iPad, fly to Vegas, and network with industry bigwigs, operatives, and thought leaders, creating as many opportunities as possible to generate buzz. So they were going about this like they were actually launching a real network, like, the WB. I only mentioned the WB because one of their consultants was an attorney who helped launch the WB for Warner Brothers. Uh, they needed to leave for loss. Okay, and a bunch of DirecTV. Okay. The broadcast consultant had overseen the launch of DirecTV's digital streaming service, so they weren't going in entirely unknown. They needed to leave for Vegas in 2 days to make the convention, which meant there was no time to submit the video to Miscavige for approval, who was also out of town. 2 days later, they were out the door, sizzle reel in hand. That 2-minute video would give the industry and the world at large its first look at Scientology's new television network. And this is before I and other people realized that this was going to be 24/7 Scientology shopping network. It was going to be nothing but propaganda and PR. Though, I mean, if it wasn't that, I wouldn't have stayed anyway. But it's just one of the things that was really very telling. Okay, they cornered broadcast executives in elevators, showing them the video on an iPad. I can imagine what they thought. They set up hospitality suites where the scissor reel played nonstop on video monitors. They booked time in the digital theaters they had set up for exhibitors' use. Most importantly, they colored as many HBO representatives that they could get their hands on. With HBO's Going Clear documentary still fresh on everyone's mind, they thought that making HBO aware of the upcoming Scientology TV network would be tantamount to thumbing their nose at them. This is my quote. Ha ha ha, you hit us with your documentary and look at us now, bigger and stronger than ever. And with our own television network, boy, are we going to fuck you up, HBO. This was literally the thinking. And did they do that? I'm not even going to ask you to put a note in the comments, because we all know they didn't. I doubt HBO gave it a second thought. Likely they had a good laugh over it, like when Miscavige sent ABC's 2020 producers a basket of baked goods prepared by Gold's Italian pastry chef. But my concern at the moment was that Miscavige had spent $100 million on the studio and was about to spend another $10 million on a multi-year deal to lease a channel from DirecTV. And I had just sent off a 2-minute video giving the world its first glimpse of Scientology TV, and I'd done so without any authorization. This is kiss of death stuff. This is like if I was in the Sea Org, get thrown in the hole, RPF, whatever. I made sure a copy of the video attached to a proposal was on Miscavige's desk before he returned to LA. Though he never officially approved the video or asked for any changes, he did authorize it for broad use, saying, okay, now this is pure Miscavige. You can't reject it. And I'm not in trouble, but he says he would have done it slightly differently, right? Like, you got to get that little dig in. Anyway, such high praise. Having pulled that off, contacted Kirstie Alley without first jumping through the expected gauntlet of bureaucratic hoops didn't seem that big a deal. When the day of my meeting with Kirstie arrived, she thought she was showing up at the studio for a casual brainstorming session. But the Sea Org execs running SMP thought differently. They rolled the red carpet out and began her visit with a VIP tour of the new facility. It's not that she didn't want a tour, but it was clear from her body language it was not what she was expecting. Following the tour, we all converged in the main conference room, the one in the admin building, not one of the other dozen or so conference rooms located around the facility. One thing about Scientology organizations, they love their conference rooms. Yeah, I think I counted on that property. There's 23 conference rooms. They're like everywhere. And it's not that big. It's like a few acres. Kirsty kept looking over at me, sitting at the opposite end of the conference table, throwing me this look of, what the fuck are all these people doing at our meeting? At one point, Kirsty stepped outside for a smoke and motioned for me to follow her. Wanting an explanation, I told her that I had nothing to do with it. I did not know it was going to go down like this, even though I hadn't anticipated that the S&P studio manager and the young woman in charge of public relations internationally, who also acted as an executive at the studio, would commandeer the meeting. I understand why they had done it, out of sheer paranoia that the meeting would go badly. Just as shit flows downhill, apparently so does the compulsion to micromanage. There was also their unstated but very palpable distrust for having an NSO, non-Sea Org member, take the lead on the meeting. I'd known two of them for years before becoming the studio manager at S&P. Sandra Lawrenson, I think she's a different name now, remarried, whatever, had run Mad Hatter Studios, the recording studio once owned by jazz legend Chick Corea, and later sold to the church, and then absorbed into SMP. The other executive, Erin Banks, joined the Sea Org with her husband Nick, son of a wealthy Australian businessman, and quickly rose through the ranks to become the MC of Ideal Org openings. I'd known Erin as a struggling actor before joining the Sea Org. She'd won a couple of small parts in gold films. Regardless of our previous experience with each other, the two of them were openly antagonistic toward working with a non-Sea Org person. This was like the opposite of working at Gold, because it was like up there, everybody was like, woof. They were like totally fine on working with me. Uh, well, until I was no longer fine at working with them, which I assume was mitigated by the cachet I'd earned for my many years of valuable work for Gold. We had a kind of one-sided inter-office rivalry. I left Kirsty to finish her smoke and went back to the conference room to explain to Chandra and Aaron that Kirsty just wanted to meet with me. They were not pleased. I used to joke at Gold that I directed films for free and got paid for putting up with the politics. This was a perfect example. When we resumed, Kirsty made it clear that the meeting was over, and Chandra and Aaron know I'd be continuing the meeting at her home. And I let Chandra and Aaron know that I'd be continuing the meeting at her home about 10 minutes away. Yeah, that was Kirsty left and said, look, just come over later and we'll have this meeting. Because she was really serious. She had some ideas for shows. They were really silly, better than anything they'd come up with. Yeah, they were actual TV shows with like fun stuff. They were very pro Scientology, but Miscavige would never have allowed those shows to see the air. I met with her the next day. She laid out her ideas for a talk show that featured comedy sketches which poked fun at religion in a non-derogatory way, all religions, including Scientology. She kind of really wanted to humanize Scientology, but I liked Kirsty. I just didn't like her politics, but I liked her as a person a lot. It was the "don't take yourself too seriously" brand of comedy. One sketch segment featured a spinning wheel inspired by Wheel of Fortune. Her ideas were creative, funny, and irreverent, kind of like Kirsty herself. It was also vastly more entertaining, informative, and watchable than anything Miscavige would authorize for airing on the channel. Unfortunately, her ideas went nowhere. That was the last time I ever saw Kirsty. Shortly after our meeting, she sold her house in LA and moved to Clearwater, and on December 5th, 2022, she passed away. Meanwhile, Dan Sherman's opioid addiction continued to rage on, and with it, his angry outburst aimed at the uncool. Apparently, Miscavige had had enough. It was time for Danny to get off drugs, and the plan was to rent a secluded house to bring in a doctor who specialized in medical detox. Now, I really want you to get the hypocrisy in all of this. They got this guy who's the L. Ron Hubbard biographer. He presents these stories, these fictional stories about L. Ron Hubbard at these international events. He's addicted to opioids. He's a menace to some staff members who he's brandishing a gun at. And Miscavige is just kind of keeping him moving because I need those scripts, I need those scripts, I need those speeches. And then finally one day he puts his foot down and he says, okay, we're going to get Danny through a purif and get him off drugs, because he really believes that purification rundown. If he didn't believe it, he wouldn't have put Danny through a purif because he needed him too much. So what does he do? He goes out and he hires one of these like celebrity doctors, like that doctor that Johnny Depp had, who do, what they call concierge medicine. And so this guy was where Narcanon wouldn't touch medical chemical detox with a 10-foot pole. They're hiring an expensive Porsche driving physician from Santa Monica to like oversee Danny's detox, right? So here was the plan. So the plan was to rent a secluded house, a house like a rock star house, after which Danny would be put through a purification program, Scientology sun and nutrition-based regimen for dealing with the body of toxins, especially drugs. I never understood why they just didn't clear out the new VIP Narconon in Ojai, the facility located in Larry Hagman's old hilltop mansion, and use it for Danny's detox and rehab. I understood it was because knowledge of the LRH biographer's drug problem had to be kept so confidential that only a handful of Sea Org members and myself could know about it. Or Danny's assistant went over the details. I don't know, did I mention this in here? Fleur is, she was the biographer's assistant. She's a sister of Lou, a very, very tight group. Sister of Lou Miscavige's assistant in Paramore. Flora, Danny's assistant, went over the details. She said she requested I be with him every step of the way. And I'm like, no, I am so busy. I can't do this. But because Danny thought I was cool, he's like, I want Mitch to be my peer of twin. And I'm like, oh no. Because my workload's not going to lessen up because I'm on the peer up. You're still expected to get everything done you need to do. She said he requested I be with him every step of the way. He wants you there, Mitch. You're part of the process. I had no problem helping Danny, but I had no idea the obligation would simply be piled on top of my already heavy workload. Yeah, I remember at first I thought, oh, I'll get a break and do the pure up with Danny, but a mere 40 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles, there are about 50 vineyards in what is referred to as the Malibu wine country. Some of that may have burned in the recent fires. I don't know, because I didn't see on the fire maps that all of that is a little bit north. It's off of Canaan Doom, what's the Canaan Doom Road as you go through Malibu Canyon. It's to the north of Malibu Canyon. It would be tragic if that stuff burned out. A few of the wineries offer secluded rentals for visitors seeking more than a day's excursion. One particular rental was a perfect detox house for Danny, located on a vast estate known as Malibu Wine Tours. Doesn't that sound bougie? I'm going on Malibu Wine Tours. Each day for about 2 weeks, I'd leave the studio around noon and head out to Malibu, finally returning home between midnight and 2 a.m., or I'd simply not go into the studio at all. The detox doctor would usually arrive in the early evening, a Porsche driving physician who specialized in providing concierge medical service to addicted celebrities. He'd check Danny's vitals, then give him whatever medication he needed to help him through the opioid withdrawals. I'd arrive early on days when it was my turn to prepare dinner, something I didn't mind doing. Yeah, I love to cook. So, and also, if I wanted to have a decent meal, I was going to have to make it. After a couple of weeks of medical detox, Danny was scheduled for the purification program. Considering that Danny's predicament needed to be held in strictest confidence, there was a question as to where he should do the pure up. Celebrity Center in Hollywood had a VIP purification facility, but regardless of having its own private parking entrance and private entrance to the pure up center, and that it was entirely isolated from the rest of the org, it was not considered confidential enough to host Danny's Pure Up. The solution was to rent another house, a lovely multi-story Mediterranean villa with a jetliner view of West Los Angeles and the Pacific Ocean. Located near the top of the celebrity-strewn neighborhood of Sunset Plaza, a small portable sauna was installed, and each day a two-person Pure Up delivery team would come down from Gold to supervise Danny's Pure Up. I had, of course, been assigned to do the Pure Up with him, as the procedure forbids being in the sauna alone. The Pure Up house had a small private patio behind a street-level wall. The other 2 stories wound their way down the hillside. Each day on the Pure Up begins with 20 minutes or so of jogging to get the blood moving. As the narrow hillside roads lacked sidewalks and there were no parks nearby, 2 treadmills were set up in the garage. We would jog with the garage door open, facing the street, watching the Bentleys, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and every other imaginable breed of exotic car drive by, mostly piloted by a range of chubby producer types, Kardashian wannabes, or escaped Russian oligarchs. At least that's what it seemed like. Though I cannot, so I could care less. I wondered what they must have thought about the 2 dudes, I should say 2 old dudes, um, on the treadmills being supervised by an athletic-looking black girl who was taking notes on a clipboard. Must have been a very strange. I mean, it would have been weird if she was white. It's just, I'm just trying to give you all the details. The fact that she's black has not much to do with it. The purification rundown has gained a lot of controversy in the press. Okay, this is my excuse to write about the purif. That's kind of, I do these narratives so I can talk about things in Scientology. Uh, the purification rundown has gained a lot of controversy in the press, driven by reports claiming the megavitamin doses and lengthy time spent in the sauna can be hazardous to one's health. Personally, now this is a little controversial statement I'm about to make, but personally, I think the purif is an expensive and god-awful waste of time. But the fact remains it might be far worse than that. The PURIF requires you to get a medical exam to ensure you don't have a heart condition, high blood pressure, or an infectious disease. Unless there's a medical emergency, such as suffering a stroke or a heart attack or needing emergency medical attention due to dehydration or heat stroke, that exam is the only medical supervision you'll receive while on the PURIF. On the surface, the PURIF appears to be comprised of healthy lifestyle choices. You're required to be well rested and to eat fresh, healthy foods daily. You exercise every day, and you take your increasing doses of vitamins, some of which you may actually be deficient in, and all of which are mostly going to turn into expensive pee when urinated out of your body, out of the body. Anyway, if you just look at those things, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start exercising, sleeping, taking vitamins, eating good. You think, oh, great. Uh, okay. In particular, the supplement niacin may be dangerous in the amount one is required to take on the Purif. And I say may be dangerous because I've not found any cases of people suffering from niacin overdose. I'm sure they're out there, but there's a lot of medical evidence that it's very, very hard on your kidneys. So it may actually contribute to, it's kind of like if you die of a heart attack, you're a smoker and you die of a heart attack. They don't say smoking killed you. They say you died of a heart attack. So if you took too much niacin and it messed up your kidneys, and then later in life you have kidney failure, they're going to say you died of kidney failure. So this is one of those dangerous situations that might be masked by the ultimate outcome that it leads to. Okay. The worst part about the Purif is the mind-numbing boredom of spending about 4.5 hours a day in a sauna, taking short breaks to shower off when you feel too hot, or a few minutes to eat a salad. The entire premise of the Purif is based on the idea that toxic substances can remain trapped in fatty cells for years. While this is true of some insecticides, the amount of stored toxins is negligible. In particular, Hubbard claimed drugs such as LSD can be released into the system and cause a person to re-experience the effect of the drug as though they'd taken it newly. He further stated that this is the cause of LSD flashbacks and why it is so hard for addicts to withdraw from drugs like the H1. The reason being the drug keeps being released into the system, keeping the addict in a continuous state of withdrawal. The entire premise of the purification rundown relies on the never proven and unscientific notion that drugs, especially LSD, remain lodged in fatty tissues. However, a 2013 article in Popular Science titled "Are Acid Flashbacks a Myth?" Let me say that again. Are acid flashbacks a myth? Traces the idea that LSD molecules can indeed hide in fat cells and can later be released to an urban legend pushed by anti-drug campaigns. And I was like, oh my God. So this whole idea, the whole entire premise of the Purif is based on anti-drug propaganda. Uh, it's a lie that some groups made up to try to scare people away from taking LSD. So in other words, There is no such thing as an LSD flashback. It is a myth. A recent study published in PLOS1, done by the Norwegian University of Science and Technology's neuroscientist Terry Krebs, found no association between using psychedelics, including using LSD, in the past year and seeing things other people don't. The study went on to conclude that, contrary to what some anti-drug campaigns will have you believe, dropping acid probably isn't going to make you depressed or psychotic. In fact, psychedelics might actually be associated with better mental health. I rest my case. Okay. But the LSD flashback, regardless of its origin as urban legend, remains crucial to Hubbard's narrative, validating the purification rundown, and it is the core of its sales pitch. That sales pitch would have you think that even if you've never taken drugs more powerful than aspirin or Advil, your body is riddled with toxins absorbed from the environment, radiation from the sun, pesticides in our foods, and pollutants in the air we breathe and the water we drink, all preventing you from thinking clearly and making spiritual progress in Scientology, and all of it based on a big fat lie. Okay, good. The purification rundown is the gatekeeper of Scientology's bridge. In other words, the purif is the big lie at the foot of Scientology's bridge of lies. That would have been a good title, Bridge of Lies. Okay, kind of reminds of Bridge of Spies, right? Okay, anyway, I think you got that. Well, let's continue talking about the Bridge of Lies. I did the purif a total of 3 times. I also helped to market the hell out of it. Okay, so now that's an excuse to talk about my involvement with marketing the purif. I mean, it's kind of how this thing goes. Hey, you know what? Before we jump into this next story, let me see, what time is it? Yeah, I can do a little more. I'm going to take a short break. I have to grab something to drink, and I forgot to put a drink here next to me because this reading really dehydrates you. So please be patient. Give me a minute, and I will be right back. Where is my stop cam? Okay, there it is. Ah, okay, thanks, guys. I'm back. Let me just, I know this sounds like a beer, but it's actually just soda water. Da-da-da-da. I should probably, start doing the T-shirt, the branded T-shirt with the Diet Coke look, except I think that's been taken by too many other on screen. Oh my God, I left that up forever. Sometimes I do that. I'll put up a chat and it'll stay for an hour. Okay, good. So this next little anecdote, has to do with the purif, but it's really just an excuse to tell you guys a pretty hysterical story that happened to me while I was trying to make a TV commercial for the purif. Okay, here we go. About 2 years into my stint at Gold, so now we're going back to like 1992-ish, I was given the assignment to produce a TV spot for the Clear Body, Clear Mind campaign, a mainstream marketing campaign designed to sell the Pure. Hold on 1 second. Something is screwed up here. Okay, we're good. We are good. Okay, designed to sell the Pure. The ad called for a shot of a pristine waterfall, but that's kind of their Clear Body, Clear Mind. The cover of the book has a waterfall on it, a very clear. So we needed to shoot a waterfall. The ad called for a shot of a pristine waterfall. A location was found near Mount Shasta in the northernmost region of California. I'd been shown photographs of the waterfall. It was perfect, about 30 feet tall and 100 feet wide, sheets of clear water cascading down a craggy rock face in a dense emerald forest. The nearby Hemet Ryan Airport, located a short 20-minute drive from the international base, is noted for two things. It's one of the 19 strategically located attack bases used by the U.S. Forest Service to stage airborne firefighting tankers. And being a backwater airport, it's a good place to earn a pilot's license without breaking the bank. The cameraman, the script supervisor, and I waited with our gear uh, next to the twin-engine Cherokee we chartered to fly us to Mount Shasta. Our pilot, described to us as the local school's top instructor, was late, very late. Finally, a young man and a brown. This has nothing to do with Scientology, but I can't think about this, the Purif and this time period, without thinking about this story. So I put it in, I wrote it down. Finally, a young man in a brown double-breasted pinstripe Armani suit, wearing only a white undershirt under his jacket and Gucci loafers with no socks, approached and introduced himself as our pilot. He couldn't have been more than 25. He had a thick Dutch accent, a shock of blonde hair, falling to his aviator sunglasses, and a Marlboro dangling from his hips. He looked startlingly like Rutger Hauer's cuter younger brother, who had never made it home from wherever he was shacked up the night before. He helped us stow our gear, and we were airborne. When I was a little nervous. He was a nice kid, but I was a little like, okay. I mean, he definitely seemed hungover. When we finally arrived at the location, we all stood in shock, staring at the waterfall. Following one of the driest winters in years, it had been reduced to barely a trickle. In my early days of Gold, I assumed whoever was responsible for scouting and securing locations would have at least contacted the local ranger station or Bureau of Land Management office to inquire about the current status of the waterfall. We wasted a bit of time searching on foot for an alternative, then defeated, headed back to the airport. By the time we arrived, the sun had already sunk beneath the horizon, and the runway, if any of you are private plane pilots, you'll appreciate this story, or aviation fans. Uh, the runway was quickly being swallowed up by the darkness. Our pilot, who had been waiting patiently, hustled us into the plane. Being a small VFR airport, meaning it was governed by visual flight rules, which dictate that if you can't see the runway, you are not allowed to take off or land. According to those rules, we'd be spending the night at a cheap motel and leaving in the morning. According to our pilot's rules, we'd be airborne momentarily, dark or no dark, poised for takeoff. It was now pitch black, a moonless night with only the dim blue lights outlining the runway to guide our departure. The voice from the tower was stern, demanding the pilot turn the plane around or return to the apron. The pilot keyed the radio, click, 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 and in his Dutch accent told the traffic controller, "You're breaking up." I thought that only happened in movies, but it really happens. Uh, then he gunned the engines and off we went into the wild black yonder. I thought that sort of thing only happened in movies. Oh, there you go. Uh, we made it back safely to Hemet Ryan. I made a mental note to always hire the same pilot. I flew with him a few more times and he never disappointed. We did find another location, and at some point the Purified was completed. Beyond that, I directed the instructional film that is used by Scientology orgs to administer the Purif, and then later another secular version for Narconon, which we went over in that earlier thing. So I just wanted you to know that I have deep connection with having worked on Purif stuff. And so when I say it's bullshit, I'm saying it, it's bullshit. Uh, but none of the purification run-ins I'd done in the past, nor any of the harrowing experiences I'd had shooting ads promoting it, could match the experience of doing the Purif sitting next to Dan Sherman. See how I got the story back on track? I think it took me a whole day to figure out. That truly stands out as the most bizarre Purif experience of them all. About 6 weeks later, we were complete with the Purif, and it was time to get back to work. Yeah, we were on it. They say the average time is about 30 days, and we were on it for 70 days. It was just, oof. Fortunately, the Hollywood Hills house where we did it was only like 6 minutes from where I was living, so it was like at least it was close. I assumed the time I'd spent put in helping Danny to kick opioids would buy me some air cover for having been mostly absent from post for a couple of months. And I assumed that my spectacular production record earned over the many years would hold me harmless against any problems that might have arisen because of my absence. But this was the Sea Org, and this was SMP being run by Miscavige's handpicked Department 3, that's Department 3 is in Division 1. Uh, Department 3, whose primary statistic was number of situations found and handled. If they couldn't find any situations, that their stats were down. In other words, they would just go around and inspect everybody and interrogate people. And if they couldn't find something wrong or something to report on or a person to rat out, then they were in trouble because then their statistics were down. If they couldn't find any situation, then their stats were down and they'd be in trouble. It was not long before I got the dreaded call. Hello, I answered, without the slightest hesitation, without announcing who it was. The female voice on the other end of the line simply barked, "Come to HCO." That was the phone call you didn't want to get. Ring, ring, ring. Hello, come to HCO. Like they didn't even, it was just the rudest thing in the world. But they want to start terrorizing you because you're coming in for an interrogation. So they want you to know right from that instant, you are in trouble. The interview rooms that HCO maintains at SOP for interrogation purposes when giving meter checks, metered interviews, and sec checks were no bigger than a small closet and always triggered my claustrophobia. The worst were which I don't have anymore, by the way, the worst were the interview rooms at Gold, where you literally had to turn sideways and suck in your gut to squeeze past the tiny desk to take a seat. And the person administering the interview, who always sat in the chair closest to the door, would have to stand up and step aside to open or close the door. I mean, it was just meant for maximum uncomfortability. Uh, that arrangement, with the interviewer sitting in the chair closest to the door, was mandated by a Hubbard technical bulletin titled "How to Set Up a Session in the E-Meter." Such an arrangement makes it nearly impossible for the person on the other side of the table to decide to walk out without the interviewer, or in the case of an auditing session, the auditor's consent. Scientology auditors and interrogators are taught that they must do everything within their power to prevent a person from leaving the room without their consent. And that includes the use of physical force. They even have drills to teach that physical force. I'd known the HCO sec checker sitting across from me in the tiny interview room located in the basement SMP since she was a baby. I was once friends with her parents. I recognized her voice when she ordered me down to HCO. And now here I was sitting across from her in the tiny interview room, and she's questioning me about the most intimate personal aspects of my private life. She was probably she wasn't a kid. There were no kids. There was nobody under. I think she was one of the youngest people at SMP. Maybe early mid-20s were the youngest people there. That's not to say they weren't recruited in their teenagers to fly, but I wouldn't know that. I have no knowledge of that. Were the things to the personal aspect? Okay. Were the things I'd done that I didn't want them to find out about? Oh, were there things I'd done that I didn't want them to find out about? Things I'd done in my private life that I wanted to keep private and that had absolutely zero to do with my work or job performance? Absolutely. I think everybody has that. Among the other things, she wanted to know who I had sex with and what kind of sex I'd been engaged in and so on. In Scientology, there is no such thing as privacy. Every day for the next few weeks, I had to report to HCO in the basement of SMP, where I was routinely screamed at by HCO staff, one of whom accused me of being, you're going to love this, accused me of being worse than a wog. Forgive me for saying that word. I don't use that word. I think it's disgusting. Wog being the Scientology slang for someone who's not a Scientologist. The worst he could come up with, you're worse than a wog. I was given the task of sculpting every precept in Hubbard's book, The Way to Happiness, in modeling clay. Okay. See, I forgot to mention how many precepts there are. There's, I don't know, there's over 20 precepts, and then some of them break down into A, B, C, D. And I had to make big, complicated clay sculptures that represented each of those precepts. This was just like torture. I mean, I know it's not like being put in the hole and beaten and all that crazy shit, but it was not comfortable. I'm not trying to equate what happened with me, what happened with other people. I'm just telling you my story. Uh, in modeling clay, a sort of three-dimensional illustration intended to test your understanding of a Scientology concept or principle. Making clay demos is a part of Scientology study technology. When complete, the clay demo is scrutinized by a Scientology instructor, and if they can recognize the concept being illustrated, the student is given a pass. I was required to spend scores of hours creating demos of concepts illustrating moral conduct, as well as reading Hubbard's references and listening to lectures. When Miscavige was on the lot, I had to leave. I was not allowed to be anywhere in his vicinity. So why didn't I just leave, walk to my car and drive away? After all, I was not contractually bound. I wasn't in the Sea Org. Why was I allowing myself to be taken off work and put through that hell? Of course, it was nothing compared to being sent to the RPF or being locked up in the hole, but for me, it was a nightmare. For the first time in all my years working for Scientology, I had lost whatever power and authority I had. I was no longer respected and my income was canceled, but I was still a Scientologist. I was still hopelessly trapped in the reality distortion field that dictated Scientology was the only hope you had to achieve spiritual freedom, and was long past having any professional connections outside of Scientology. So I kept showing up. I kept agreeing to be traumatized, humiliated, and accepted that I was a bad person who needed to reform. In the lexicon of Scientology, there are two words that hold special significance: overt and withhold. An overt is a contra survival, against survival act, something you've done that could discredit you. A withhold is simply the act of withholding the overt act. A man robs a bank. He has committed an overt. Weeks later, he's in traffic and a cop pulls up next to him at a stoplight and looks over at him. He wonders if the cop knows about the robbery. This is called a missed withhold, wondering if someone knows about your overt or nearly found out about it. In an auditing session, any overt you are unwilling to disclose is considered a withhold. You are told that if you do not tell your auditor every detail of every aspect of your life, every secret, every private thought, every overt you ever committed, then you are damning yourself to an eternal hell in which you will have destroyed any chance of achieving spiritual freedom. If it's discovered that your auditor failed to find your withhold, whatever ethics or justice action could be levied at you for having committed the overt will be levied against the auditor, and worse. If the person had done something deemed particularly egregious that the auditor failed to find, the auditor would most certainly be banished to the RPF. We'll let that sink in a minute. I guess the words, oh no, they're telling the truth, that just doesn't exist in Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard was obsessed with loyalty. He thought the surest way to maintain loyalty was keep track of his followers' deepest held, most intimate secrets, because those secrets might contain a plan or a plot to do him in. In 1960, he developed an interrogation technique known as the security check, which I've talked about extensively in this book, and which you've all heard about extensively on YouTube. I was nowhere near YouTube for a long, long time when I wrote this. The technique was incorporated into the Scientology auditing process known as confessional procedure. On the lower levels of Scientology's bridge to total freedom, or bridge to total lies, there is an entire level devoted to confessional procedure, sold to parishioners for its therapeutic value, allowing a person to unburden themselves of turmoil resulting from their transgressions. Receiving a confessional is a requirement of attaining the state of clear. Excuse me. In a Scientology confessional, the pre-clear gets off their withholds, that means says what they were, and is told they are forgiven for anything they have honestly and fully disclosed. The security check is the weaponized version of a Scientology confessional, of Scientology confessional technology. The person receiving the security check is told, I am not auditing you, and everything they disclose is written up as a knowledge report and sent to the ethics section, who will follow up with whatever coercive actions are deemed warranted. Scientology parishioners are routinely sec checked in order to progress past clear. Scientologists must be granted eligibility to continue with the confidential OT levels. Eligibility also requires high dollar donations, as well as time spent volunteering for Scientology sponsored programs. In other words, before you're allowed to participate in your own spiritual advancement, you're required to prove yourself worthy. These eligibility sec checks will continue at least twice yearly for as long as a person remains in Scientology. The content of the security checks is a main reason most people who leave Scientology don't speak out. Fear of having their secrets spilled all over the internet. Based on my metered interview, a committee of evidence, or COMEV, was convened to adjudicate my crimes. The COMEV is the Scientology equivalent of a court martial. In reality, it is a kangaroo court that rarely, if ever, finds in favor of the accused. I'd been in Scientology for over 40 years, and during all that time, I'd never come anywhere near receiving a COMEV. Based on the findings from my COMEV, I was ordered to undergo a sec check and do 50 hours of amends. Exactly what the 50 hours of amends was comprised of, no one would say. It was left to you to figure. You figure it out, and we'll get back to you. So you just had to present it to them. I did this. I killed every psychiatrist in the LA area. And they're like, no, not enough. It's just like, it's not a documented thing. There's no menu of making up the damage. I'd seen this happen to many people. They get in trouble for some infraction. Their statistics were down. They'd done something inappropriate with a member of the opposite sex, or they failed to meet a deadline. That should be in quotes. Done something, because there's a lot of things they think are inappropriate that you could do sexually, or they're the most sex negative group I'd ever known, or they'd failed to meet a deadline. The list was long. Suddenly, the division, or in some cases, the entire organization, had a reason for its recent troubles. A scapegoat had been found. Oh, yeah, that's the whole other thing underpinning all this, is that you always needed somebody to blame when there's a problem, and they would just. This is how they would figure it out. Uh, Such was a situation I found myself in. Yeah, I became a scapegoat. I was the cause of why content for the network wasn't being completed, and for why the programming lineup was so far behind schedule. From that point on, I became a designated scapegoat for all the problems the studio was having with the upcoming Scientology network launch. I was essentially banned from the studio lot and told to report to the HGB. That's the building where the clown car notice, the Office of Special Affairs, that's where they parked the clown car. The middle management building on Hollywood Boulevard, where a sec checker would take me in for my daily dose of interrogation. I thought if I could just get through this, I could land on my feet and get back to work. I was determined to be 100% honest, to tell them everything they asked. I literally threw myself at their mercy. I didn't want to be thrown out of Scientology. And I think a lot of people who've been there would absolutely understand what I was going through. My sec checker at the HGB seemed friendly and warm. She seemed to genuinely want to help me get cleaned up and back on post. After all, I had that reputation for being the person who directed all the technical training film and spearheaded the look of Scientology, jump-starting the global propaganda machine and steering it away from looking like a two-bit cheesy offbeat religion. So, being high quality, the Scavenge used to say I was responsible for creating visual work that commanded respect for Scientology. None of that seemed to matter now. It wasn't enough to get me off the hook. But the woman who was sec checking me seemed to think it did, and wanted to see things get back to normal. I think that was kind of her job, was to get me back to work. So there was nothing altruistic about it. About 3 weeks into the sec check, I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, meaning the trauma they'd inflicted on me, they were now easing. It's no different than an abusive marriage where the abused partner cooperates with their abuser, hoping to get those good feelings back. And those good feelings were coming back. My daily sec check appointment wasn't until 1 p.m. I'll never forget this. So I'd taken myself to lunch. I was taking a leisurely stroll down Ventura Boulevard in Studio City when I got the call. It was the same HCO staff member that had screamed at me, accused me of being worse than a wog. Please come to HCO now. But I have a session scheduled for 1 p.m., I replied. The response was, come to HCO now. If HCO ever calls and supersedes an auditing session or a sec check that you have, you know you are in for it. Because those things are supposed to take precedent over everything. Anyway, I called the HCB and spoke to my auditor. She said she'd heard someone at S&P had canceled our session and that I'd been ordered to S&P. It was highly irregular to cancel someone's sec check before it was completed, especially when it was going well and almost done. Arriving at HCO, I headed straight for the basement where I was asked to wait in one of the small interview rooms. Eventually, the person in charge of the ethics division showed up and let me know that there was someone I needed to meet with. It was a total mystery. Right on cue, the mystery person swung the door open. It was my old senior from Gold, Amber O'Sullivan Meller, a completely psychotic individual. Somehow, Amber had managed to intervene and convince HCO at S&P that I should be sent back to Gold. This was just a big power play. This was an entirely political power move on her part. With me now being the senior director at S&P, Gold had lost its most valuable creative individual, and Amber had figured out a way to haul me back up there. This was horrible. The ethics department at S&P was saying, you have 2 weeks, you're going to go to Gold, you have 2 weeks to get through a program and come back here. And then Amber was saying, you need to get rid of your house, your car, take your children out who were living with me at the time, and come up here, and you're going to be here at least a year. And it was just this is when I'm done, guys. I'm fucking done. It's like, this is why people ask, like, why people don't leave Scientology. It's like they're never going to leave until they have either received enough abuse and they start to recognize the source of the abuse, or they've seen so much abuse, or it's happened to someone close to them. And that's when they start to leave. It's like all of this stuff is great. And I hope people on the inside hear some of this. And it's really aimed at just letting the world know, so maybe legislators know and lawmakers know, same thing, and something can be done to lessen their power by removing their tax exempt status. But anyway, okay. So right on cue, okay. Somehow Amber had managed to intervene and convince HCO at S&P that I should be sent back to Gold. This was an entirely political power move on her part. I need to practice reading. This is a lot. I haven't read this for my book yet, so I'm actually about to. Because usually then I'll rehearse it a lot. Okay, with me now being the senior director at S&P, Gold had lost its most valuable creative individual, and Amber had figured out a way to haul me back up there. The MAA ethics officer who'd been working with me on my ethics program informed me I had 2 weeks to prove myself and get back to S&P. Amber had other plans for me. And that's going to be in the next chapter, which is entitled appropriately, Hurtling Towards Despair. And it is a lot of trigger warnings. There's some attempted essay, not essay, unaliving. There's all kinds of crazy stuff happened. Anyway, it's actually going to be a difficult one for me to read, but I'm going to read it. Hey, let's take a look at the comments. And thank you, Oliver. I didn't think I'd get through that whole thing because it's quite long and a little triggering, but whatever. Okay, so here we go. Let's go back. Love Food Kitchen said, I like that you're keeping my frog nonsense on the screen way longer than is necessary. Yeah, I think what you're really trying to say is you like that I was having an elder moment and forgot to turn it off, but it was funny. Yeah, pretty much. This is pretty much Amber. Sorry, let me put this up here. Adam Carmona says fill the vacuum equals flood the zone. Yeah, I mean, it's a really stupid, I mean, literally, like when, hey, Ryan M. Hi, Mitch. I'm glad to join you today. Hey, nice to see you. You're from Canada. Love Canadians. They're like Americans with manners. Yeah, this is, I'm a little rattled from reading all that shit. But yeah, but literally, it's like when bad news comes out about Scientology or those demonstrations, so people get in trouble with Miscavige because they weren't filling the vacuum properly, or that wouldn't be happening. They never connect their own they never connected their own actions with the reaction from the public. They think they push this idea that, oh my God, we need to, we need to fill the vacuum. People don't know. They don't know how wonderful we are. Ah. Anyway, and they think we're all fucking crazy. Uh, Wise Mama says, what did she say? Where is that? I hate the way StreamYard works in terms of showing chat that comments. It's really clumsy. So anyway, yeah. Hey, Wise Mama. Hey, thanks for coming by here. Degraded Daughter. I have an answer for you, by the way. I'll send you an email. Japan of Green Gables said, Mitch, please don't tell me you murdered every psychiatrist in the LA area. That's not how you go clear. Oh, no. No, I didn't. I actually didn't. Actually, I think I hired one or two of them. Okay, okay, there we go. Japan of Green Gables says, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Mitch Corleone. That's really funny. Uh, Wow, and that's okay, Cassius Scepter. What do we I think I missed a couple of here. BOC buddy, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Good evening, Mitch. I will catch this chapter on replay. Had my grandson stop by today. Hope you have a great night. Gave it I hope not. Gave it a like already. I'll give it a like already. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Anything we can do to spread the word, it's really appreciated. And those likes actually really influence the algorithm. It's all about engagement. Well, anyway, and Chevy K said, hello, thank you for sharing your experience. You're very welcome. I have to tell you that it's really different reading it. Like when you write a book, it's got to be read by people that you know very well, and then a bunch of strangers. Like you don't know them, but it's when you're writing it, you feel much more of a connection with the people that are watching you live, and it's a really different experience. Um, Okay, here we go. Love Food Kitchen. The level of detail in the book is so valuable, similar to Mike Rinder and Mark Headley's books. It's not just entertaining, but every chapter is like an education. Yeah, thanks for that. Mark, I have to say, he was actually, I believe he wrote the first book. And I remember when I listened to his book, which is wonderful, and it was read by him. And of course, it really brought so many things to life because, when he talked about his escape and the road and the police and the security guards and the vehicle, like I was familiar with all that stuff. And yeah, when Mark and Claire left, that was always a loss. That was like I had to put them in a compartment and be like, okay, you're gone. Be well, do your thing. Like people didn't automatically become my enemy because they, hopped the fence or escaped from the base because they're people that I liked. So anyway, yeah, that's that. Okay, this is a question from Japan of Green Gables. I have a question that is kind of silly. When you were at work, did you eat in the Seawork mess hall or did you bring lunch? I was having dinner when I joined, so I have food on the brain. Yeah, it's no problem. Let me see. So when I was at Gold, they have a dining room, which they refer to as MCI, which stands for Massacre Canyon Inn, which sounds very apropos. They're right up the street from there. There's a physical location called Massacre Canyon, where apparently there was some kind of the local the indigenous people a long time ago have massacred one another or one side, and so they call it Massacre Canyon. But anyway, it's it probably can hold 400 or 500 people, although it never has. Now it probably has about 200 people, and the food is decent at Gold. It's not as good as all the staff brag that it is. It's just okay. It's decent. It's like mid-level food at a Holiday Inn or something. But and they do have a lot of organic stuff, and they have deals with like Whole Foods, who grows a lot of stuff in that area, and because they kind of Gold has always been this sort of elitist organization because was Miscavige's home up there. So the facilities also serviced him for a long time. He hasn't been up there since 2013. So it's okay. It's decent. So, but when I first went there, there was a building near the old studio called the Tavern, which had this faux Knights of the Round Table motif. Uh, and there was about 6 or 7 of us who were hired professionally. We worked in there. We were kept very isolated. But then later, around the time that the whole was established, like in 2000, whenever that was, 2003 or something, I don't remember. I don't know the exact date. Um, Around that time, for some weird reason, Miscavige had all of the pros move into the cafeteria. And just we had a table there. Actually, when I first went up there, I ate at a table with, uh, assigned to a table with a construction pro who was a Scientologist, and then a couple of other people, a couple of which were like handlers, who were like helping me get established up there. But yeah, I ate with the crew, but at my own table. Then when I was at the HGB, let me see. Then when I was at, I jumped ahead. We're gonna get it. I'm hungry, so I got a food thing on my mind too. When I was at SMP, they 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 didn't have cooking facilities there, so they'd bring food over from the pack cafeteria. It's just the food is horrible, and then they'd serve it up there. So not only was it bad, but it traveled, 10 minutes across Hollywood. But I would often go out to lunch there because it's in Silver Lake, which is in a really awesome area, and I wasn't restricted to that base. So me and a friend, we'd walk off base, um, and sometimes the staff, they let the staff out to go get a haircut. There was a cool barber shop near there. There was some nice coffee shops. And sometimes the staff would go out, they, had time to do that. But then when I think it was thanks to my friend Rachel Hastings, who had escaped or tried to escape, maybe it was the first time, they just clamped the place down and none of the Seward people could leave. Uh, so yeah, I was eating pack-based food at SMP or going out to lunch. And then when I was before that when I was at ASI for about a year and a half, the food there was great because I was there. Miscavige was there all the time. So wow, that they bring in like incredibly expensive catered food. And then when I was being sec checked at the HGV, I was just completely on my own with the rest of the Sea Org crew, standing in line, throwing a bunch of slop in your plate, cold scrambled eggs, whatever the hell it is. So yeah, I sort of experienced the full gamut. I think this was one of the reasons that I had some ex org members pushing against me when I first showed up because I'm like, it was just I had so much experience that so few people had ever had, and I wasn't like I was trying to have a unique experience or even bragging about it. I just wanted to tell my story. Okay, so this is from Japan at Green Gables. When Mark emailed you after he escaped and you had to tell him to stop, did part of you not want to do that? Or at that point, did your faith, I'm not sure if that is the right term, make you not? He didn't actually email me. The first time Mark tried to contact me after he left, because we knew each other really, really well. I mean, we worked together on the film set every day that for a couple of years. He actually reached out to me on um, on MySpace, believe it or not, and he said, "Hey, Mitch, it's Mark. They're going to be telling you a lot of things about me. Don't believe them." That's all he said. And so I blocked him because I was still in that mindset. Like he and Claire, they were kind of compartmentalized, but I didn't want to get mixed up in communicating with them. And then over the years, as I became more and more disenfranchised with Scientology and more realizing I've got to get out of here because I didn't even realize how much it was affecting me, like that thing and the superpower building when I had that color deprivation and I became like emotionally like racked and I couldn't even fly back to LA. Like I thought that was just all about me. I didn't realize that I was in this incredibly toxic environment. Um, but then over the years, I would think more and more about those guys because they were two of the people that I thought the best of. Mark and Claire and Mike Rinder, not Marty Rathbun. He is just a fucking snake. I didn't care when he left and he was speaking out against Scientology. It just didn't make me like him. Uh, but he was another person that I knew well. But I wrote about him. You guys can read it. I think I already read it, so I did read it. He was really an emotional vampire. But Mark and Claire and Mike and who else? Amy. I never worked with Amy, but I knew her. These are people that I really liked, and there's some others. I mean, I have a list right now. There's 3 people on my list of Sea Org members who work at Gold, and I just would just hope that they would leave because I would love to be reconnected with these people because they're talented and they're really good people. They're just so trapped. Uh, did uh, hold on, tell okay, so yeah, that's the story with Mark. And so yeah, I was definitely like, I can't be in communication with these guys. Um, and I did honestly, I mean, my mindset was like they kind of lost their way. I mean, I never thought of them as suppressive persons. And when they filed their human trafficking lawsuit, I was like, "Oh, guys, don't do that. Just go away. You're never going to win. You're never going to win. You don't have the resources to win. Just go away. Just live your life." Like that was my attitude. And then later, when I found out, and I reconnected with Mark and with Claire, and they're most amazing people, and they have done so much help that they never report on. And even before the Aftermath Foundation, they were spending their own money to help Sea Org members who had left and needed help. So these are terrific people. Uh, but here's another question here. This is Love Kitchen wants to know, did you arrive at Gold when it's basically as it is, or did you see old Gilman House, the original Bonneview, etc., before it was all demolished? Yeah, I did. I did see all of that stuff. Uh, the first time I went to Gold on a tour, and for some time, for a few years after that, the Bonneview. That was the old L. Ron Hubbard house, which that sort of $50 million, mansion that has replaced it was built. They tore it down, but yeah, I was there then. Uh, and what else did you say here? The old Gilman house. I remember that. The old Gilman house was where they would put people like I think. Jerry Moorhead was held there for a while. They'd kind of put people that were under watch that had tried to leave that were being security checked every day. They'd put them in the old Gilman house. They'd also used it for what they call ISO, which stands for isolation. When you get a cold or something, they have to send you away. You don't get to hang out in bed and watch TV. They make it very uncomfortable to be sick so that you'll get better quicker. There's an incentive. But yeah, I did. I saw all of that stuff, and I was also there before they built the City Castle, the studio, because essentially they built it because my arrival resulted in a big increase in production, and then they were like, "Oh, let's build another studio." So, and I was also there before they renovated the kitchen. There was at one point when Miscavige decided that he wanted to completely redo the kitchen so that he could brag about it because he loved to brag about it. Of course, this was the same kitchen that not only made pretty decent food, but made rice and beans. I think the longest I saw those guys, there was one period, I think it was about 6 weeks that they were all on rice and beans. And it's really uncomfortable because you're sitting up there and I'm not eating rice and beans. I'm having whatever, roast chicken. And it's really, and to see these guys and they're all kind of smiling. And then they'd sort of cheat, they kind of have different salsas and things chilies and things you could add to it. I think I might have smuggled them some stuff. Um, I used to make homemade salsa. I would bring it up and give it to the guys. So, okay, so here's the next comment. Japan at Green Gables. I remember Mark and Mike saying once that during breakfast, Gold used to have some kind of granola that was like horse food. Yeah, I don't know about that because I hardly ever had breakfast there because I would I would just make a protein shake in my room and then go to work because I wasn't required to, go to a roll call or anything else. I could show up for whatever the set call was, and nobody cared what I was doing before that. But I must say, after they renovated the kitchen, they started making their own nut butters and their organic and their own granola. And the granola was really good. I mean, I used to grab bags of it and take it home. So they sort of corrected all that. But I'm not refuting anything Mark said. That was I think before the kitchen was renovated. Uh, The one thing about food, Miscavige is he really big, like on food, like that you can control people with food. Like when he tried to send baked goods to the producers of the 2020 show when they were doing the story about Ron Miscavige's book, and he's like, "Look at the baked goods we provide for our staff." Like he really thinks he has some magical thinking about food, and I think that was part of upgrading all the food at Gold because it's a very narcissistic pendulum thing to do. Like, look at what I did for you, and then look how much you screwed me over. You're all getting beans and rice. 6 weeks, I couldn't believe it. I thought people were gonna start having, like, nutritional problems because of that. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. Marty sounds like this is from Japan of Green Gables. Again, Marty sounds like he's a really difficult person to get along with. Even during the period after he left and before they paid him off, I was glad when Mark, Clara, Mike, and Christy made that video. Yeah, he was really a piece of work. Uh yeah. Yeah, I remember when my marriage sunk into some really serious, like it literally, crashed onto the rocks. Some of it was due to my absence, and some of it was due to I had just become kind of not a good person working there. And Marty was assigned to be our like auditor to try to fix our marriage, and that was just the kiss of death. I mean, that guy, he only knows one thing: fighting. Like anything, he's like, "Oh, your wife wants to divorce you? Okay, let's go to war against your wife." Literally, like everything he did was like a freaking war. Okay, and then Japan of Greek Gable said that video. The video about him, so I could get why they were friends with him. Really, it was so that I could get it why they were friends with him. Yeah, I was never friends with him. I kind of well, I don't know. I never liked him. He was kind of a scary guy. And here's another one. You have a lot of questions, a lot of comments, which is totally fine. Definitely didn't have an easy life before Scientology, though, or during or after. You guess you're talking about Marty? I don't know about that. I don't know. I know that Miscavige used to tell these outrageous jobs. Um, He used to no, not outrageous stuff. He used to tell these outrageous stories about Marty after Marty left. Like he'd say things like, "Did you know that his mother was electroshocked while she was pregnant with him?" And all these just crazy stories. So but I don't know what his life was like before that. Okay, Japan of Green Gables said, "LOL, good job on the smuggling." Yeah, I used to on Christmas, they get to drink. They have this thing called a beer and cheese party, and they get to drink, and they get really drunk. I mean, Seaward members know how to drink. I was with them on a couple of those parties. Once I got stuck at Gold, another time I got stuck at S&P on that whatever that day is, near Christmas when they have the party. And these guys drink, but the a couple of people I worked with, like that Amber person and the other director I was training, they would ask me to send them up the airplane, the little micro bottles of Irish cream and chips and salsa, and I would like pack up, uh, an ice chest and send these care packages up to these guys. And I somehow, because everything gets inspected by HCO, maybe because of who she was, she had a lot of authority there, or maybe they just worked it out. So it was like, okay, HCO, you guys, take your 20% grift off the top, and we'll take the rest of the stuff. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Oh wow, it's going on 2 hours. Okay, guys, look, you're not going to want to miss this next chapter. This next one, hurtling towards despair. Even the story of how it got named is pretty outrageous. But yeah, yeah. So let's be sure we tune in for that one. I'm most likely going to be doing it tomorrow. In the meantime, I just really appreciate you guys being here. I know I don't have a very big channel. I would love to see it expand, but at least I know that these videos, especially the ones reading the book and telling these extra bits of detail, at least I know they have a place to live so that whatever happens, that it'll be there for posterity. But spread the word, let your friends know, leave comment if you like something that you heard from me and you're watching other channels or whatever means of communication, let people know. Let's get the word out. You guys have a great Friday night, and I will see you very, very soon. Hey guys, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the algorithm so that videos like this can reach a broader audience. And be sure to hit that notification bell so that you'll be informed when new videos drop. For additional ways to support this channel, please click on the link tree on the Scientology The Big Lie channel page. This work is only made possible with your support. Thank you.